When we're talking about what the bees or the pollinators in general like to eat, they can be broken into 3 different groups. Monolectic means that they feed on just one plant species. And that plant species could be a big plant species group, or it could be really narrow and not a very rare plant. And so once that plant species goes away, so do the pollinators, whatever it is that it's a specialist on. Oligolectic means that they feed on a few and usually related taxa, so like anything in the aster family. And the aster family is a very large plant family, so that might give them quite a few options, but they are restricted to feeding off of anything in that family. And then polylectic means that they can feed on many different types of plants. They're generalists, sometimes they'll be called. And even though they are generalists, they could still have preferences. And so they might still prefer something in the bean family. So there might be a whole bunch of asters, but there's just a couple beans. They might go to those beans first, still be able to feed on the asters, but still have a preference. So that's kind of the plant side. And then now I just want to talk quickly about nesting sites and how pollinators are found nesting and what their nesting habitats are. So when we're talking about pollinators, I'm usually meaning native bees. Not always, but that's just usually what I teach about, and so I talk about bees a lot more than anything else. And they are the most important pollinator because they can fly and transfer pollen a lot farther, a lot more efficient. They have different tongue structures. They are just so numerous, and so by sheer number they make good pollinators, different reasons. But when we're talking about nesting sites for bees, about 70% of all of the bee species nest in the ground. And I think that, at least I didn't know that when I first got into bees, and that was like a mind blow. And so that's why bare soil or patches of bare soil is so important to have in your landscape, because those bees will find it, nest there, raise their young, and so on and so forth. About 29%-ish will nest in wood. So that would be like the bee nest, the artificial bee nest that you find. Picture on the right is a huge conglomeration of bee nests. You can either make them, or the bees will find any sort of pithy stem that they can excavate out and make their nest in. Rose canes are a perfect example, raspberries, things like that. And then less than 1% of all bees will live in a large cavity, and those are social bees. And that would be, of course, the honeybee living in a hive. So it's important for anybody that's trying to conserve pollinators to make sure that they do have bare soil for the species that nest in the ground, as well as any sort of twigs or ornamental grasses they'll also nest in, things like that. And so either offer it to them artificially or with your plant material choices that you're making in your landscape naturally. This is just a couple of pictures of bee nests in the ground on the right, top and the bottom, and then a couple of bees nesting in twigs on the left. I saw this happen at Pioneer Park last summer, and it was like they were actively nesting. I was looking at something else. I just happened to like be kneeling and looking at something, and then I saw a little Seratina bee. They're blue. They're shining in blue. And saw it nesting in a flower stem of a penstemon plant. And it was like making its nest, and it had already clearly like laid eggs and stuff, but other Seratina bees were like trying to like take over because this is like apparently a great spot to have a house at. But the other one that was already there just like stuck her little butt up and just stayed there, and so nobody could get in. It was fascinating. How do not everybody love like bees and bugs? I just don't get it. Okay, so to talk about the Nebraska pollinator habitat specifically, like I said, this is the sign. This is the outdoor sign. This does not come automatically with certification, but the cost of it only covers production costs, so just to be fair. But we're very proud of it, and we really like it and how it turned out, and we've got a lot of good feedback from it. This is the guts of the pollinator habitat. We started last year there was a backyard farmer segment in April that was kind of like the unveiling, and the application was put online at that time and things like that. Anybody is welcome to become certified. It doesn't have to be private homeowners. Businesses are more than encouraged, schools, school gardens, things like that. We would love to have more schools that are certified. That'd be fantastic. But it's really open to anybody that just wants to conserve pollinators and be recognized for it. That's literally it. So it's not just planting the plants, but that's certainly a part of it. But there's other conservation practices that have to be in place before certification can take place. And then by having that certification, we're hoping that it helps then educate others, like your neighbors that may or may not have contact with us, and sure, I'll tell anybody that wants to listen about pollinators, how great they are, but I can't talk to everybody, obviously, and you guys have relationships with people in your own life, and so once we start the seed, we're hoping that it spreads and grows and everybody gets certified. Good. Okay, so anyhow, so this is the website, and like I was saying, it's really just a landing spot right now. We're hoping to, over time, get more information, especially more information on like the growing habitats or growing requirements of the plants that we're recommending, and things like that. And we want to put different pictures of certified landscapes up as well. So we just talk about, what's pollination, who are they, a little bit. But then more importantly, if you go over here to the left, you'll see the application. And I just want to go through that real quick and answer any questions that you guys might have about that. Okay, so obviously there is your contact information that we just need to know. But then it goes immediately into the garden requirements. And the section number 1 is plant diversity. We really just like to give you options, I guess, as far as what you're planting. But diversity is the most important thing as far as what's going to result in a diverse population of pollinators. And so the more plants that you have, the more plant species you have, the more bee species you're going to have, the more butterfly bee species you're going to have. Because you're going to start drawing in the specialists that are only seen on certain plants and not just the generalists that are always found on sunflowers or things like that. So then you scroll down and then you go straight into plant selection. And there's three categories. We called spring, March, April, May, just so we could try to even the months out a little bit. We realized that March is difficult, to say the least, in Nebraska to plan for or to plant for. And so we have a variety of things, and depending on if you're on the eastern side or the western side of the state, there should be things that are included for any of you. The bloom time might be a little different, but that's still okay. And so you have to have, you can have as much as all of them, but you have to have at least 5 plants, and that's not 5 number plants, that's 5 species off of this list. And so we want diversity within the seasons, but we also want diversity within the season. And so we don't want just crocus and then you're done until June. You really need to have floral resources starting now and throughout, the first really killing hard frost in October. And then you go into June and July. And I will say that our group is looking at this list and we're trying to expand it. So it's not quite so limiting because we've had a lot of feedback, and that's been the best part actually about being a new thing, is that people are more inclined to give feedback, and we really like that because it helps us know what's a struggle. And there's been a lot of feedback on how the spring plants are a little harder to find in the nurseries. And so we're trying to look at that right now and edit that to add a little bit more options. But then there's summer, and then of course there is fall. And it's not just for bees, it's for literally any pollinator. And if you have something that you've seen bees visit continuously, or something that you always see pollinators feeding at, and it's not on the list, we do recommend that you at least mention it to us in your application. Say, hey, such and such plant's not on the list, but I've really seen a lot of pollinator activity. And so then we can do the research to find out, okay, who are the pollinators on this plant? Is it something that is so important that it should be on our list? Or maybe it's just an exception at that one time. And so that's an option too. So always, please be free to like give feedback, ask questions, make suggestions, things like that.
So to tell you, I know somebody's going to ask this question. Do you consider annuals as part of that?
Annuals are, thank you for that, Terry. Annuals, we're changing, they're not right now on this application that you're seeing, but we have talked about it for the next version of the application that they will be included. Because right now too, we don't have anything like herbs or vegetables that if you ever want a fruit or anything like a tomato, obviously it has pollinators and has a pollinating importance. So that'll change as well. But right now there are no annuals, but that would be something that I would encourage people to ask about until the application changes to include them. Yeah. Did that answer your question? I'm going to assume so. Okay, thanks. And so then section 3, it's not only just about the pollen and the nectar for the plants or for the pollinators. If you are looking at any sort of butterfly or moth, they're going to have a caterpillar stage or the larval stage where they have chewing mouth parts and they're feeding on actual plant material, leaves, stems, things like that. And so you have to have something as a food source in your landscape for the butterflies and moths at that larval stage. So like dill, milkweeds for monarchs, obviously. Actually, a lot of herbs are really great for butterfly larvae, things like that. A lot of trees are as well. And so anything that you have for either the larvae you'll see on the left and then adults on the right. And sometimes it's the same plant, and that like milkweed nectar is great for adult monarch butterflies, and the larvae will feed on the plant material. So that's not really a hard one to do. Like I said, water is essential for anything that's living, and just kind of to tell us what you have, so we ensure that all things are met or all requirements are met. Shelter, it's not so much for shelter from the wind so much as it is for nesting, overwintering space, things like that. Then there's a section on pesticide use, what you do, we just want to know. And then it goes into section 6, with the conservation practices. And this is something that's literally just for good garden or landscape stewardship, not so much necessarily directly benefits pollinators, maybe indirectly. But like mulching your landscape, it's going to decrease weeds, it's going to keep moisture around the plants longer in the soil, things like that. And so you have to have at least 5 off of this list, and there's 4, 5, 6, 15-ish to choose from. And so chances are that you're already doing these. Or if you have to add 1 or 2, then we give you some ideas on what to pick from. And then this is just information about your garden. We just want to know how big it is, what kind of habitat we're dealing with, if it is urban or if it's rural or if it's somewhere in the middle. But again, anybody can make a difference, and we really encourage if you're interested to become certified. There is a $20 fee that goes back into the program and is only spent on pollinator habitat activities. So just so you know where that money goes.